okay, hold on. You're doing all this chaotic stuff. You hate the results you're getting, and yet you're complaining about it.
A lot of people, they realize that, or they realize they're not happy and that they're not where they want to be in life, but yet they continue to do the same things.
But if you get outside of where you are, you find your mind starts opening up to the just all the possibilities. If you can look at the positive with the negative.
Absolute pleasure listening to you, man. You've got some really great insight. Loving it.
Fill your day with kindness. You can always control that. Look at what you can control versus what you can't control. Get that out of the way so you can stop worrying about the weather and all these other things you're letting them mess up your day, right? And just smile. It resets even in the hardest day. Just smile.
I'm excited to talk to him because it's hard to find real estate investors that are extremely successful that are willing to share their stories. So Jason, thanks for being here. I appreciate you hopping on.
Hey, it's great to be here, Dr. G.
Tell me about your background a little bit and, inform everybody about your rise to where you are, your whole, not the whole history, but where you started. Give me a glimpse into that, where you're at now and what you can, help the audience with in their journey, if you will.
Sure. So today, right, we'll talk to today and then we'll backtrack from there. Today, about 350 million of acquired real estate, commercial real estate. We buy apartment buildings, very similar to what Grant Cardone does. We buy multifamily. We typically buy workforce housing where he's buying Class A or just recently built or built within the last 5 to 10 years. So we buy workforce housing properties in prime locations. We're in 7 different states, really 7 different cities, a lot targeted around here in Middle Tennessee. We've been doing that since 2017. When we brought our first property, myself and my wife, a 94 unit in Louisville, Kentucky, and just really hit home with that business and started to grow from there. But there's a long route to get to that decision to do that. I went to college after facing just some real challenges in my formative years. When I was 13, my best friend got killed in a boating accident. When I was 14, I had a friend commit suicide. I was 15. I had another friend got in a car with people that were drinking, got killed in a car accident. And then, just myself trying to figure it out. I had a girlfriend, and after 4 years of being with her, she was killed in a car accident at 17. And so I ended up leaving high school, just really kind of lost. My parents had a small business. They were facing a lot of challenges. Many times small business owners, you're either kind of good at the work or the business, but typically you miss on some, right? And so my dad was great at the work, but the business side was always faltering. So they were constantly struggling, trying to piece it together. So when I went to college,
it's funny that you mentioned that, Jason, because that's exactly what I found and why I help people because I do business consulting and also personal growth consulting. And in the business consulting, that's the one thing I find is that a majority of business owners started a business because they love to do this thing, but they don't realize that business ownership of a business is a different skill set. And so you actually experience that. And we help them bridge that gap to where they get the skills to own that business and do the thing that they love to do. Anyway, so when you went to college, it's where I cut you off there.
What's funny about that is, so I've known a lot of chefs over the days, right? And people are always good at cooking, right? And someone recommended you, oh, you're such a great cook, you should open a restaurant, right? And that's usually the first falter right there is that they open this restaurant, they have this love of cooking, but then they get slammed in the face because they start failing as a business owner because they know how to cook well, but they don't know how to run the business, right? And so you can equate that to all different levels of business. So, getting back to this, I went to college, I was lost, didn't really have any motivation, just kind of felt dejected. I had a girlfriend at the time. Her mom suggested I should just do a degree in business and finance. And that was really how I was making my decision. She was like, you're good at numbers. Why don't you do that? Right. And so I wasn't really making very straightforward decisions. Well, I leave college, I graduate, I moved to New York City. I was living in New Jersey at the time and just had no motivation to go into anything finance related. So the next thing was I started working in bars and restaurants. And from there, did that for a number of years, almost a decade where I was working in bars and restaurants. But what I found was that I just wasn't satisfied in my life. I wasn't satisfied with the results I was getting, right? I wasn't healthy. I was in, having just negative responses to everything I was doing. I was in bad relationships and everything was just continuing to compound. And then lo and behold, one night I was leaving, working at one of the bars. It was like 2:30 in the morning and riding my bike across Manhattan. And out of nowhere, I got hit by a car. So here I am. I get taken to the hospital. Get a pin in my wrist. I think I have a broken shoulder, stitches in my chin, back of my head. I'm just a mess. And I finally get out of the hospital in a day or so. And all I'm thinking about is like, man, I have to get back to work so I can make rent. And there was a pause where it was just a moment where I took a glance at really everything I was doing and everything I was saying. And I was like, okay, hold on. You're doing all this chaotic stuff. You hate the results you're getting, and yet you're complaining about it. So either you have to stop complaining about all the results because you continue to put yourself in this position, or just do something different. And, like
It's
probably a
funny
lot of
though.
people.
A lot of people, hey, sorry to interrupt there, but
Sure.
a lot of people, they realize that, or they realize they're not happy and that they're not where they want to be in life, but yet they continue to do the same things.
Yeah.
They don't take the moment to say, I'm going to switch this up. And obviously there's a lot of fear involved in doing that. So how did you get to that place where you said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do this no matter what. I'm going to switch and go in this new direction? Because I did the same thing years ago, about a decade ago. It was, I can't keep doing what I'm doing the way I'm doing it and live the life I want to live. It's just not going to work. So I needed to switch it up big time. And that meant taking my wife and my kids with me in this new direction. So how did you get to that point? What was the process there?
As I said, it took me a number of years, and I was just doing the same thing, right? And you get comfortable in wherever you are in life, and you can get comfortable in great spots, right? And sometimes that's to your disadvantage. You get comfortable in good, but not really fantastic, but you can be comfortable in miserable too, because you think that if you change, it could just possibly get worse. If your mind is set on the intention that everything you do is just going to produce bad results, then you're going to stay where you are because it's more comfortable to stay in an kind of uncomfortable area to stay in and then have the chance for things to go even worse. So at that point, I got back to my apartment. I was dating a girl, and she was just not a great one for me, right? She was so angry at me when I got back, she was screaming at me. And I was like, I'm just fed up. I just left and took my bulldog, right? And so I walked out and I was like, all right, I'm just doing something different. I don't care. And at that point, when you get to that point, you say, well, what should I do? And that's probably why a lot of people don't change, because they just don't know what to do. And my point was like, I'm just going to do the opposite of what I'm doing. That's all that came to my mind. Just do the opposite, right? So stop staying out late and drinking, right? Start getting up at a set time every morning. Start working out again. Start actually reading some books or taking in some positive information. I remember leaving school and being like, I'm never going to have to learn anything again. As that was the good thing. When you think today, right, you're like, that's a crazy thought. But at the moment, it was like, I'm just not going to have to read anymore. Fantastic. So start doing something that was positive. And it wasn't this immediate transformation. But what happened is that I started to slowly replace negative things with positive things. And 1 day to 2 days to 10 days to 30 days to 2 months, what started happening is a lot of the negativity was being forced to the perimeter, right? To the outside, because I was starting to fill myself with more positive life aspects, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I went from working at the bar, I got enough of the gusto to say, okay, I can do something outside of this. So I opened up my own bar, opened up a restaurant, opened up and sold a brewery, and started to really move in momentum in that way. And then instead of saying life was against me, I started looking at things in a positive way to say, okay, well, instead of, oh, why is me? What's next? And so Hurricane Sandy happened. I was in New Jersey at the time. That decimated hundreds of thousands of homes on the East Coast. And my dad's small business, where I was talking about earlier, well, his business is really dedicated to lifting and moving buildings. So his business overnight went from doing 12 projects a year to having about 1,000 phone calls a day. So my little brother and myself, my now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we moved to New Jersey, and we helped dad scale up from these, really seemingly a couple jobs a year to about 350 jobs a year. So just exploded that business and did that for a number of years. But what I found between that and the restaurants and just bars was that everything I was doing was transactional. And these are these lessons I was learning. Okay, if I want to get back to control of my life, I had to find a way to control the day. Because right now, if there was 25 hours in a day, I could use them because all I was doing is I had to be there present at the job for have some kind of revenue related task to happen. Right? If I'm not there serving a drink, I'm not getting money for the drink. If I'm not there doing a construction job, I'm not getting money for the project.
But that's where most people live, though. They live in the false security of, I'm going to go in and do this thing and I'm going to get a paycheck for it. And, I think there's a very few individuals that are crazy enough or that have that brain wiring where they're like, I'm going to take that risk and I'm going to move into this new thing and we're going to see what happens and I'm okay with whatever turns out. That's pretty rare. In fact, a lot of people that listen to this, they tell me, man, I don't know if I could ever do that. I don't know if I could take that jump. I know I'm trading my time for money. I just don't see myself being able to go for whatever. And what I always tell them is you don't have to go for whatever, but if there's a dream, if there's something that's inside of you that keeps coming up to the surface and you keep pushing it down, that's the thing that you need to do, whatever that is. And
I feel
sometimes
like,
it's writing a book, sometimes it's doing something, that's not starting a business necessarily, but whatever that thing is.
What I think from that decision is I completely understand that. But usually we take that from where we are to the worst case scenario, right?
Mhm.
And so today I have a safe in my own mind job that I get a paycheck every Friday that, I just go to, I do my 40 hours and I go home. But in the same front there, if I leave that job and try something else, well, immediately I'm going to be bankrupt. They're going to foreclose on my house. They're going to come and steal my dog. That's like what the world comes to our mind, is that we look at the worst possible scenario that could happen if we try something different than the comfortable stance we're into. But if that's the 0.1% chance of happening, right? The worst case scenario, then you have to give credence to the other part, right? Okay, great. 0.1% in the positive, right? You leave your job, you finally sit down and you write that book that you've been dying to write because it's going to be helpful. That book becomes a bestseller. Next thing you know, you're on all kinds of talk shows. Next thing you know, you're speaking around the world, right? Then that's the 0.1% to the positive. Well, somewhere in the middle is going to be where you're going to land. But if you get outside of where you are, you find your mind starts opening up to the just all the possibilities. If you can look at the positive with the negative. But we're so trained and so conditioned, just look at the negative, right? What we do right now, if we change it, it's just going to get worse. Well, typically, no. It's typically never going to be. Very, very rarely we're going to see something fall off the cliff because you're trying something different. But even if things don't go to plan, you still have the possibility to go back to that job. So great. Okay. You can always go back to the job. But are you going to be very happy in 20, 30, 40 years when you say, you know what? I thought about writing that book, but I decided it was too risky. No, you're going to be absolutely upset yourself because you never put yourself out there to just see what was possible.
In my groups, we call that the rocking chair test. So take a rocking chair test. Look at yourself when you're 80 years old, 90 years old, and you're sitting in your rocking chair on your front porch, and you look back at your life and you say, I wish I would have blank. I wish I could have, or I should have blank. What you do is you imagine yourself as that person, and you write down all those I wish I should have, wish I could have, and you start planning for them now. You start taking action on them now. That way, you never end up in that position. I know 100% I will never be in my rocking chair going, man, I wish I would have traveled to blank. I wish I would have written that book. I wish I would have started that business. I wish I would have talked to that person. I'm like, there's no fear. Eventually, we're all going to be dead anyway, right? So whatever. Just
Yeah.
put it out there, see what happens. And more often than not, what I found is good things will come about. And if it doesn't go the way you think it will go, at least you learn something, which is a good thing. So I tend to look at everything and say it's probably not going to be as negative as what most people think it's going to be, and I move forward anyway.
You typically don't need more than you have right now to go out there and try it. We always want to think, well, if I just take that one more class, or if I just do this one next thing, right? Or I get so much money in the bank account, all it's just needed is just for you to go take that one step, right? And you just need to take that first step to start. We usually think like, I've run a lot of long distance races, right? And I run 100 miles. And, if I was to go my first 100-mile race, but like I just have 100 miles to go, my mind would be like, forget it. We might as well just give up now, right? But what I trained myself to do is I started to run 6 miles every day. I'd run longer distances on the weekend, but 6 miles every morning, right? No matter what it was. My ankle hurt, my ear hurt, I was sick. It was 2 degrees out. It was 150 degrees out. I would just run 6 miles. So I knew when I got into that race, all I had to do was just complete the first 6 miles. And then I got there and said, okay, we're here. We're at the aid station. Okay, what do we do now? Let's just run the next 6 miles, right? Okay, let's just do that. You got there. Okay, let's just run this next 6 miles. And every time I got to that next 6 mile, I just say, okay, where do I have to go now? I just have to go to another 6 miles. And it might get tough, right? In your life, it might get tough. And you might just say, well, let me just run another 300 feet. Okay, great. When I want to quit, I might say, okay, that's fine. It's tough right now. Well, let's just run to the bridge. And if you're still telling yourself you want to quit at that time, then we can have a real conversation. But let's just get there. When you get to that next step, you've just got yourself over the hill. Then you run another 4 miles and you got to that next part and you have that conversation. Then you run the next 2 miles and lo and behold, you're at 100 miles completed over a series of just long, short distances that you just created this mile marker for you to go. And that's you and your goals. Your goal comes and you're usually by the time you get to your goal, you're so far past that goal that you don't even realize you're there because you've grown in a person, you've grown in everything you wanted to do, right? And you've accomplished so much in your life that by the time you get there, it's just the next step. Usually what happens is people see these goals as when I make $1 million or when I write that book, that everything in time is going to stop and it's going to be perfect. No, it's just going to be that day that you accomplish that. And then the next day starts. And then you'll have that next thing you have to go over. So look at the goals as ways to set up mile markers to get there, but know the goal doesn't transform you or make you who you are. You are who you are, and you have everything you need to accomplish what you want. But you just have to take that first step, because that first step gives you usually 4 different directions you go. The first is you are completely in the wrong direction. Okay, at least you took 1 step and not 50, and you learned in 1 step. Okay, so turn around, go the other direction. 2, you're kind of in the right direction. So you say, okay, this is kind of good. What do I need to learn from this to pivot? Or 3, right, you're on the right path, and you take all the energy you have and you put it behind you, because now you know you have momentum, and that leads you on the path to the second, to the third, to the fifth, to the 50th, and going from there. But the 4th step is the most important, is that we forget that not taking any action is still a choice, right? We've chosen to not take any action. And that is worse in most cases than going the wrong direction, because there's no lesson there. You don't know what you haven't learned because you've decided in your own front to take no action.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. In fact, we talk about that in my groups or in my consulting as the happiness isn't in the end result. It's not in the goal. The happiness is movement toward that end result or that goal. So every little step you take toward it is where the happiness actually resides. I was working with this guy one time and he wanted a Ferrari. And I said, why do you want a Ferrari? And he said, oh, because they're just awesome. And, that's a sign of success. And I go, yeah, but specifically, like, where did that desire come from? Like, where did it start? He thought for a while and he's like, when I was a kid, we used to go to book fairs in my little grade school. And I remember seeing this picture of this Ferrari and I wanted it. And I took my money and that's what I bought. And I bought this car, this picture of this Ferrari. I put it in my room. And that's, that to me was success. It was that person made it. It was a cool, awesome sports car. And I was like, okay, so have you ever sat in a Ferrari? Have you ever experienced one? And he's like, no. And I said, so your assignment for this weekend is to go to a Ferrari dealership and go sit in one, go test drive one, go feel the leather, go like experience it. And he went to a place that is it's a couple 100 miles from here, but there's a bunch of different dealerships all together. Generally they are, you got the Aston Martin, you got Ferrari, you got Lamborghini, all of them are there together. And on our next call, he's like, I said, what'd you learn? He goes, I found out I don't want a Ferrari, I want an Aston Martin. And I was like, so what if you had just held on to that because you'd never experienced it and you worked so hard and you ended up getting a Ferrari and you're like, this really doesn't hit the mark for me. How devastated would you be? You get to the goal that you thought was going to be your dreams and you're just like, it's not as cool as I thought. That's why I always tell people, envision yourself, but also if you can go experience it a little bit, go experience it. So have you ever done that where you're like, I wanted to see what it felt like to fly first class or whatever. And you're like, I went ahead and did it. And what was the end result of that for you?
What's funny about that is that social media has compounded this now, but the most important thing is to make sure you're living your goals. Because you see so much online today that many get stuck living in goals that really just truly aren't theirs, right? And then so they're reaching for something, but they're not truly invested into it. So
or it's like the idea of it.
Yeah, it's the idea, but they're not fully committed because it's not really their goal. They kind of saw it, but they're not like all in, right? Because it's not their goal. And so what happens, they never reach it and it must not be for me. Well, it wasn't your goal to start with. We're just picking that goal, right? And I hear this a lot in our space for real estate. People will say all the time, I just want to buy 1,000 units. And you're like, and you're like, okay, why? Like,
why that number? Why
that number? It's just number that's been set out there and everybody says, I want to get to 1,000 units. You're like, okay, well, you break down and you look at it like, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? Like, we're trying to get this much revenue to cover this much expenses so we can basically live for free, right? Because our cash flow, that. And you get down to it and you're like, well, you need at most 64 units and you can do it. Right after all this, like this big number that's so huge and grand and so giant, right? That they can't ever imagine getting to because it's just this big number that's not theirs. Then you get real and you say, okay, 64 units. And you say, okay, how are we going to accomplish that? We're going to buy 164 unit building. Are we going to buy 416 unit building? What are we going to do? And now you get an action plan. And what happens? They start creating and accomplishing a goal. And for myself, many times what I found in mine is that I started doing different things in real estate to find where multifamily was. So when I left, the construction job, we were still running the business, helping dad grow. We got dad to retirement. Fantastic. But I knew that I did not want to do that. I knew and saw the struggles for everything there. So we started doing what we thought was the next step, which was this blue ocean of real estate, which is just a million different things. We started flipping homes. We started doing high end. We started doing wholesale, started doing Airbnb, started doing long-term, would say out of state investing. And each of those things, we were trying them out, but we were trying the space to say, okay, this might be the space we want to go into. And we were doing fine with it, good enough, but not great. So we kept asking, like, where's the space we need to be able to accomplish our goals, to get to our revenue part, our net worth goal, right? Be able to get our time. We could build a team that can help us control these properties and grow. And finally, one day I came on a podcast and someone was talking about investing in large apartment buildings. And I was like, those are all the pieces I've been looking for. Right. And so everything we used from learning and how to do different aspects of real estate gave us the understanding for what we didn't want to do, but how to grow into that space. And so we went all in learning that space, how to understand, underwrite, find the market, grow the team, put together the business plan, go out there and find investors. And we went all in that space. And that led us in 2015 and 2016 to put together the model of where we wanted to go with this plan to buy the 94 unit in 2017.
I think a lot of times people mess up because they look at the short term instead of the long term. In today's society, it seems like everybody wants everything now. They want to lose weight now. They want to be rich now. They want whatever. They want everything now. And I did that for a little while too. I thought, if I just work harder and take more action, then I'll get there quicker. And that's not really the case. You have to think in that long-term plan. And once I started doing that, I started to see that, there's this big goal out here, but as long as I'm taking small steps towards that goal, that's where I'm excited and I'm happy. That process went with a student of mine. Literally, she goes, "Hey, I need 250 clients." And I'm like, "Well, how many do you currently have?" She's like, 83. I was like, "Well, that's a huge jump. That's a big number. There's a lot of distance there." I said, "So what's your real financial goal?" And she told me the financial goal. I said, "So if we increased your students by 10%, your collection per student by 10%, and how long they stay by 10%, you'll hit that financial number." She went, "No way." And I did the math and she goes, 10% is all? I don't need 250. I'm like, "You don't need 250. You need 10% increase in those three elements." And she was like, "Well, let's roll. Let's go." And she was very successful in it. But it's funny, if you don't do the math, you're just out there guessing and hoping. And I love when people say, "I want to make $1 million." You're like, why?
Yeah.
Why
Be
$1 million?
strategic with your goals. Be
Right.
strategic with your goals, right? You have a goal. Well, walk back how you got to that goal, right? And many times you talked about the Ferrari, like, or Lamborghini. Ask 5 times. You ask why 5 times. You're going to get to the basis of why you want that, right? Well, it's just going to make me look like I'm, successful. Well, to who, right? Why? Like, why do you need it, right? Yeah, why does that matter, right? But you think about that, when you look at that, you find this number that I always need more and more, but there's many ways that you can be more indebted to, because now if she got 250 clients, can she treat them like she's been treating the 83, or she can be better to those 83, grow by 10% and get to her goal? I mean, but many times our goals are just, we say them, but we don't put anything behind them. Right? It's like, you think of anything, like you typically you're looking into like going to figure out how to buy the house that you want to live in, right? You put work into that, right? But you think about the spouse you want to be with, right? The person that you want to marry, right? You think behind that. The car you want to buy, you think behind that. But your goals, you just throw them out there. No real thought behind them, right? And they just magically, I should have this goal, because the hardest thing is you want to commit to the goal. But where we don't commit to the goal is because we're fearful that we won't hit the goal. So we don't want to put the homework behind it just in case it doesn't go right, that we can say, we didn't put that much time and effort into it. But if you don't put that much time and effort into it, then you're not going to get it. Right?
Right. Isn't that funny? Because if you don't even go after it, you're never going to hit it anyway, right? That's what you were saying. It's so funny why that happens, but how that happens. But I think we worry about what other people think way too much, instead of just going after what we believe is right for us. How do you get over that fear? How do you
What's the good saying out there? We're always worried, like in our 20s, we're worried what everybody else is thinking. In our 30s, we stop so much worrying about what other people are thinking. In our 40s and 50s, we realize nobody has time to think about us, right? And that's pretty much
nobody was thinking about you in the first
Everybody's
place.
so busy. If you think the last 2 years, there's been more information created than the entire history of the world before that. Right. And so you think about that, how much is happening to people in every day? I mean, how many alerts you're having? You're saying like all the text messages you're getting in like 2 seconds, right? Like you think about that before we start the podcast, like there's just so much happening. People are so involved. They have their life, they have their work, they have their kids. They don't have time to be thinking about you and your choices, right? You need to be worried about your choices, and you shouldn't be worried about their choices, right? You want to be helpful and kind for them. You want to support them in all their ways, right? But you have to really do yourself the service of helping yourself first. Because if you can't help yourself, you're not going to help other people. So the whole point is just turn it back on you, be aware of how you're showing up, and just own it, right? And own how you're showing up. And if you're worried about what people are thinking, well, turn it back on yourself. Okay, am I showing up as the person that meets my goals? If the person that meets your goals got up early, stayed in the office to the last person, made all my kids like football or soccer games, made 50 calls before lunch right there, out there and read an autobiography every month. If that's what that person should be that meets the goals, am I doing any of those things right now? If the answer is not even close, okay, well, we shouldn't worry so much about other people. We have a lot of work to do on ourselves right now. So where do we start?
Yep. That's awesome. I always tell people we do a 90-day challenge and we talk about you're 90 days away from changing your entire life. And most people don't realize if you identify what your dream life is, which we do what's it called? A reverse plan, basically from the end. We say, look, what does your dream life look like? And let's line it out. What's your dream car? What's your dream house? What's your dream whatever? What does that look like to you? What's your daily dream? And once we put money to it, it becomes a lot more real. And you realize how close you really are to your dream. Like when my wife and I did it, we put ridiculous things in there that we thought were ridiculous. And we found out that if we have passive income of $23,000 per month, we can live literally like kings and queens. It was ridiculous. I'm like, we can do anything we want. So literally over the last decade, it was, let's get to that 23 grand of passive income per month. And as we approach that, getting more and more exciting of like, we're going to be able to take that world cruise that we wanted to take and not have to worry about it. Like it'll be producing. But the first step is we like get your vision of what you want, put it to numbers, pull it back to where you are. And then you say, okay, what inspires me that it gets me excited that I can move toward that? And it's not that complicated really, but I think it's funny because we don't tend to focus on those things. We tend to focus on what we're currently doing, whether we like it or not, because we feel trapped in it. And so I would really challenge everybody to do that, just to say, what would my ideal life be if I really wanted it just like I wanted it? Don't put any negative thoughts into it. Just literally let it flow. What does that look like to you? You'd be surprised what comes out of you.
The goals, when they become actionable, become real. Right. And it's the Tony Robbins, you need to have progress in your life. You feel like you're making progress when you make an actionable goal. Right. And so but there's nothing better than saying, where do I want to be? What's the first step, second step, third step I need to take? Because then you feel like you're completing and accomplishing something. And when you do that, you just start to get momentum. There's no other way to say that. But in reverse, you can get negative momentum too, right? And so if you keep going on that same direction, right, keep having bad thoughts and keep, doing things that are not serving to the person you want to be, well, that momentum is true and compounds in the opposite way too. So you need to be just self-aware about being proactive towards your goals, right? And there's no time to wait, right? Like you think, I always like this picture of this couple who's like 70 years old with their first trip in Venice, and they're like in the gondola and they're like passed out sleeping, right? While the guy's like this beautiful day and the guy's like taking them down. They're so exhausted, right? And it's just that point. You don't have to wait, right? That's a mental choice that you're making right now, that you have to wait to go after your goals. Yeah, that's it.
It's a belief.
Yeah, and make
I
those
can't have it because I'm not worthy, or I don't have the money, or whatever. It's just it's BS.
And I'm not worthy. I mean, it's 100%. Like that's another thing that people believe. I'm not worthy. To who? Right? To who? We have this God who's put us here. You have all you need within yourself to go out there and do things. You weren't made to just come here and be average. Right? You're telling yourself a story that you are here and you should conform to some norm that's just a norm that's been ingrained in us because of society's lack of just feeling comfortable to say what's true, right? We can all have the greatest life that we want. But it's not, if you don't have the greatest life right now, doing the same thing over and over again is not going to just magically one day create the greatest life. And usually we put our energy into that goal, is that when I get to that goal, then my life will be great. Well, no, the actions, 99% of the time, it's the actions. To think that the day you get the goal, that everything's going to be happy. Well, if you weren't happy the entire time, the goal is not just going to make you happy, right? You're going to just be miserable at the goal saying, man, this didn't fulfill me. And then what are you going to do then? Right. So understand that the process is where all the work is, right? You have to be understanding that it's not going to be easy. So you're not going to just be magically, all sunshine and rainbows every day where everything's just fantastic every single day. But if you understand that you are working to your goal and you do things that help you feel like you're making progress and you do actionable tasks that's intentional each and every day, you're going to get farther and farther. It's like Grant Cardone, you spoke on earlier, his 10X book, right? You set a 10X goal, right? You might not hit the 10X, but if your goal before was 1X and now you're at 6X, well, that's sure a lot better than 1X, right? You hit the 6X.
Because the goal that's not where your happiness lies. Jason, it's been an absolute pleasure listening to you, man. You've got some really great insight, loving it. Any final statement that you'd like to say to everybody listening to this? Anything that you'd like to hit home?
Dr. G has been great, man. Thanks so much for having me on. I would say fill your day with kindness. You can always control that. Look at what you can control versus what you can't control. Get that out of the way so you can stop worrying about the weather and all these other things you're letting them mess up your day, right? And just smile. It resets even in the hardest day. Just smile. And when you do that, what happens? Your mind resets. Everything resets. You can just take a pause. You can think of things proactively, and you can just enjoy where you are.